Yeah, so you got to be careful. My mom used to be like, don't be out here sneaking around with these boys, because they might be related. You need to let me know who you're talking to.
Candy Burris and Money Long talk about spending time with Beyonce and splitting writing credits.
I danced with her one time, and Julius tried to push me down. He did.
In February 2023, Muni Long stood on the Grammy stage in a gold gown, holding her first trophy for hours and hours. And the world finally saw what she'd been screaming from the shadows for over a decade. She'd written hits for Rihanna, Mariah, and Chris Brown, carved out a living behind the curtain while her own dreams sat on a shelf collecting dust. And then TikTok changed everything. One sleeper single, a flood of late-night confessions, and suddenly, the ghostwriter became the voice. But here's the thing about finally getting your moment after all that time in the dark. Sometimes the people closest to you can't handle the light. By 2024, that Grammy glow had dimmed under the weight of a crumbling marriage, diary pages exposing betrayal, and a body breaking down from lupus while her own managers allegedly locked her away in a psych ward instead of getting her real help. The woman who spent years making other people's pain sound beautiful was now living through her own kind of hell, and this time, there was no ghost to hide behind. This is the story of Muni Long, the songwriter who finally sang her own truth, only to discover that fame doesn't protect you from the people who were supposed to. But to understand how she got there, you have to go back to a place most people have never heard of. A small, quiet stretch of Florida called Gifford, where a girl named Priscilla Renea Hamilton was born on September 14th, 1988. No silver spoon, no industry connections, just a voice that could fill a room and a dream that felt too big for a town that small. Back then, the internet was still young, still wild, still a place where talent could find you before the machine did. Priscilla knew how to work it. By 2008, she was uploading homemade videos from her bedroom, just her, a camera, and melodies that hit different. No fancy production, no label polish, just raw feeling poured into covers and originals that started catching eyes. YouTube was the new audition stage, and she was performing every single night, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice. And someone did. Capitol Records came calling in 2009, offering her a deal at just 21 years old. It was the kind of moment that changes everything, or at least it's supposed to. They promised her an album called Jukebox, Radio Play, the whole world watching. She believed them. Why wouldn't she? She'd worked for this, earned it in that Florida bedroom with nothing but hope and a Wi-Fi connection. There's something sacred about that moment before the industry gets its hands on you, before the contracts and the compromises and the quiet ways they reshape your voice to fit their formats. Priscilla was still whole then, still hers, still convinced that talent and hard work were enough. She didn't know yet how many young black women had been handed that same dream, only to watch it dissolve the second the numbers didn't add up fast enough. In 2009, Capitol Records gave her the keys to the kingdom. What they didn't tell her was that the lock had already been changed. The keys didn't work. Dollhouse dropped in August 2009, and for a minute, it looked like the dream might hold. The single climbed to number 11 on the Heatseekers chart. Not Billboard Hot 100, not mainstream radio rotation, but something, a pulse, proof that people were listening. She did the interviews, smiled for the cameras, talked about the album that was supposed to change everything. Jukebox was ready, waiting in the vault, packed with songs she'd poured herself into. All Capitol had to do was push it out into the world. They never did. By October 2009, the whispers started turning into silence. The album was shelved, not delayed, not rescheduled, just gone. No explanation that made sense, no second single to give it a chance. Just a quiet decision made in some executive's office that a 21-year-old black girl from Gifford didn't have the numbers to justify the risk. Maybe it was bad timing. Maybe the promo budget got pulled. Maybe they just didn't believe in her the way they said they did when they were signing the papers. Picture that studio moment. The day someone from the label sits you down and tells you the dream is dead before it ever really lived. You're 21. You've been working toward this since you were old enough to hold a melody. And now they're saying, the world isn't ready. The market's tough. Maybe next time. Except there is no next time. Not with them. Priscilla walked out of that building with a broken record deal and a choice to make. Disappear or find another door. She chose the door. Because here's what the industry never seems to understand about Black women in music. Rejection doesn't kill the gift, it just redirects it. If they wouldn't let her be the voice, she'd become the pen. If they wouldn't play her songs, she'd write them for the people they would play. And shine she did, just not under her own name. By 2010, Priscilla had reinvented herself as a songwriter, and the industry that wouldn't let her sing suddenly couldn't get enough of her pen. California King Bed landed on Rihanna's Loud album that year, and it wasn't just album filler. It was a deep cut that hit different, the kind of song that soundtracks breakups and late-night drives. 6 million copies sold, and Priscilla's name was tucked away in the liner notes where most people never look. She watched Rihanna perform it on TV from her living room couch, pride swelling in her chest, mixed with something else. The bittersweet ache of knowing it was her melody, her heartbreak, but someone else's spotlight. The hits kept coming. Don't Wake Me Up for Chris Brown in 2012, climbing all the way to number 10 on the Hot 100. Songs for Mariah Carey, including A No No in 2018, adding legendary names to her resume. The industry started calling her their behind-curtain secret weapon, the writer who could crack the code on what made a song stick. She was good at it, really good, building a career in the shadows, while other voices carried her stories into the world. But there's a cost to being a ghost. You get the checks, sure, you get the respect from the people who know, but you don't get the stage. You don't get to feel the crowd sing your words back to you. You don't get to own your own pain in public. And somewhere in that decade of writing for everyone else, Priscilla had to reckon with the fact that she was disappearing into her own success. In 2014, she married Raycian Hairston, a partnership that felt like it could change the trajectory. Together, they started building something. Not just a marriage, but a vision for what independence could look like in an industry that had already tried to shelf her once. She released Colored in 2018, an independent album that felt like a test run, a quiet way of asking herself if she could still do this, if there was still space for her voice after all these years of lending it out. The album didn't break through, not commercially, but it planted a seed, because after a decade of writing hits for superstars, Priscilla understood something most artists never learn: how to make a song undeniable. She just needed the right moment, the right platform, the right version of herself. The name Priscilla Renea had too much history attached to it, too much Capitol Records disappointment, too many songwriter credits where her face should have been. So in 2019, she killed it and became Muni Long, a rebirth that felt like shedding skin. With Raycian and partner Rashad Tyler, she founded Supergiant Records, her own label, her own rules, her own shot at controlling the narrative that had been written for her one too many times. This time, she wasn't waiting for radio programmers or label executives to decide if she was worth the risk. She was building in the shadows, crafting an EP called Public Displays of Affection that dropped in November 2021 and quietly climbed to number 10 on Apple Music's R&B chart. No major marketing budget, no billboard campaigns, just songs that hit the algorithm right and hearts even harder. And then came Hours and Hours. Picture a dim-lit studio night in early 2022, her phone buzzing nonstop on the table, TikTok notifications flooding in like a tidal wave she didn't see coming. The song she'd posted independently was catching fire, spreading from user to user, bedroom to bedroom, heartbreak to heartbreak. By January, it wasn't just a viral moment, it was a movement. The song peaked at number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100, her highest solo chart position ever, and went gold certified by the RIAA. It spent 8 weeks at number 1 on the R&B and hip-hop airplay chart, a sleeper hit that refused to sleep. TikTok had done what Capitol Records couldn't. It let the people decide. No gatekeepers, no format restrictions, just raw emotion meeting the right moment at the right time. And suddenly, after a decade of being the secret, Muni Long was the revelation. Def Jam came calling in March 2022, but this time it was different. She still owned Supergiant, still controlled her masters, and the partnership felt more like a collaboration than a takeover. Tunji Balogun, the label's chairman, saw what the algorithm already knew. Muni sets the new standard, he said, and for once, the industry was following instead of leading. The ghostwriter had finally stepped into the light, and the light didn't burn her. It amplified everything she'd been holding back for over a decade. February 5th, 2023. The Grammys. Muni Long stepped onto that stage in a gold gown, the trophy for Best R&B performance heavy in her hands, and for a moment, time folded in on itself. Every rejection, every shelved album, every song she'd written for someone else's glory, it all led to this. Hours and hours had done what a decade of hustle couldn't. It made the industry stop and recognize what had been there all along. Her acceptance speech trembled with the weight of it. A decade of waiting compressed into 30 seconds of gratitude. This wasn't just a Grammy. It was validation. Proof that she hadn't been wrong about herself back in that Florida bedroom. That Capitol Records had fumbled something real. The crowd stood, the cameras flashed, and Muni Long finally got to hold her own spotlight. The momentum didn't stop there. By October 2023, Made for Me was climbing the charts, eventually hitting number 20 on the Hot 100, and, after 26 weeks of grinding, landing at number 1 on the R&B and hip-hop airplay chart. Billboard Women in Music gave her their Rising Star Award, another ceremony, another moment where the world said her name out loud. She was touring, performing, doing press runs, living the career she'd been denied 15 years earlier. But success at this level doesn't just demand your time. It demands your body, your marriage, your peace. Beneath the gold gowns and the standing ovations, cracks were starting to show. Her body was sending signals she didn't have time to listen to. Fatigue that felt deeper than exhaustion. Pain that wouldn't quit. And at home, the dynamic with Rayson was shifting in ways she couldn't name yet. The kind of tension that builds when one person's light starts outshining the partnership. She kept moving because that's what you do when you finally get your shot. You don't stop, you don't complain, you just keep performing until something breaks. By August 2024, the cracks had become chasms. Muni posted the kind of message that stops your scroll. Raw, unfiltered, the digital equivalent of ripping pages out of a diary and letting them scatter in the wind. She'd found messages, she said, extramarital conversations that painted a picture she didn't want to believe. The man she'd married in 2014, the one she'd built Supergiant Records with, the partner who was supposed to celebrate her Grammy instead of resenting it. He'd betrayed her in the quietest, cruelest way. Disgusted I allowed this behavior, she wrote, and you could feel the rage and heartbreak bleeding through the screen. This wasn't a publicist's statement or a carefully worded press release. This was a woman scorching the earth because the foundation she'd built her life on had turned to ash. Rayson Hairston wasn't just her husband. He was woven into every part of her comeback. Co-founder of the label that finally gave her control, the man who'd been there through the ghostwriting years, the one she'd once described to People magazine as giving her a level of intimacy I'd never experienced. But somewhere between the TikTok explosion and the Grammy stage, something had shifted. Reports would later surface about his insecurity over her rising fame, the way success can poison a partnership when egos can't handle the imbalance. Picture the courthouse steps in LA, paparazzi lenses clicking as she clutched whatever dignity was left after 9 years of marriage dissolved into legal documents and tabloid headlines. No fairy tale ending, no amicable split, just the messy public unraveling of a love story that had once felt like destiny. She didn't retreat into silence. She did what she'd always done, turned the pain into music. Revenge dropped on August 30th, 2024. 14 tracks of unfiltered confession and reclamation. "Love yourself, ladies," she posted, her voice steady even as her world fell apart. No time for nonsense. The album wasn't just about Racine. It was about every woman who'd ever had to rebuild herself after someone she trusted broke the blueprint. Funny how the same love that builds you can break you too. Lupus doesn't announce itself with mercy. It creeps in, then hits like a hammer. By 2025, Muni's body was waving red flags she couldn't ignore anymore. Tour dates started falling like dominoes. Missed shows, canceled appearances, Instagram posts apologizing to fans who'd bought tickets to see her. She was supposed to be on the Boy Is Mine tour, riding the wave of revenge and Grammy glory. But instead, she was fighting a war inside her own body. The kind of chronic illness that doesn't care about your comeback story or your chart positions. Lupus is an autoimmune disease where your immune system turns traitor, attacking healthy tissue until everything hurts and exhaustion becomes a permanent state. For a performer, for someone whose job is to show up and give energy she doesn't have, it's a nightmare. And in those moments when the pain gets unbearable, when the flare-ups spike and your body screams for help, you need people around you who will get you to a hospital, who will prioritize your life over their bottom line. Muni's managers allegedly did the opposite. In December 2024, she fired Chaka Zulu and Jeff Dixon, the team who'd been guiding her career through its biggest moment. By October 2025, they were suing her for $600,000 in unpaid commissions, framing it as a business dispute over money. But on January 6, 2026, Muni fired back with a countersuit that revealed something far darker. According to her attorneys, during a lupus flare-up, a moment when she was in excruciating pain and desperately needed medical care, her managers allegedly forced her into a mental health facility instead of taking her to a hospital. She was isolated, her legal team stated, with no contact, no proper treatment for the physical illness ravaging her body, just a psych ward room and the kind of institutional neglect that leaves long-term negative effects. Picture that scene. A woman at the peak of her career, Grammy on the shelf, body breaking down, and the people she trusted to protect her allegedly choosing control over compassion, containment over care. It's the kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than infidelity, the kind that makes you question if anyone ever really saw you as human instead of product. And yet, she's still here. That's the part that matters most. Not the lawsuit, not the headlines, not the betrayals, but the fact that Muni Long refused to let any of it erase her. Revenge wasn't just an album title, it was a mission statement. 14 tracks of unfiltered truth, the kind of R&B that doesn't apologize or sugarcoat, just bleeds onto the track and dares you to look away. When she called it the best R&B album in 5 to 10 years, folks had opinions, but that's what happens when you refuse to play humble after the industry's tried to break you. She wasn't being arrogant. She was being honest about what it takes to make music when your life is the wreckage you're singing over. Real subjects, she said in interviews, defending the rawness of it all, the refusal to give people a nice story when the truth was so much messier. And her fans got it. They showed up in the comments, on TikTok, streaming hours and hours, years after it first went viral, turning a sleeper hit into an anthem that refuses to fade. She'd created a blueprint without meaning to. The ghostwriter who reclaimed her voice, the independent artist who cracked the algorithm, the woman who turned personal devastation into chart-topping vulnerability. Even now, in January 2026, with the legal battle against her ex-managers still unfolding in real time, Muni Long is fighting, not just for herself, but for every Black woman in music who's been mishandled, mismanaged, or made invisible by the very people supposed to protect them. Her countersuit isn't just about money or vindication. It's about refusing to disappear when powerful folks want you quiet. Because Muni Long's story isn't about the Grammy or the betrayal or even the hits she gave away. It's about what happens when a Black woman decides she's done being a ghost, and the world finally has no choice but to see her.